Did you know that on average, a person has about 6,000 thoughts per day, and 80% of them are negative? When we slow down and make space, we force ourselves to confront the difficult thoughts and emotions that hold us back.
There are things that are reality in our lives. Things happen, like tinnitus happened. It's an objective reality that I live with. But then there are the stories that you write in your own brain about those realities. And the story that I think often people write with tinnitus in their own brain, and I certainly did, was this is too hard, it's too much, it's overwhelming, I can't concentrate or focus on anything else in my life. And you have an anxiety stress response to that actually, because it doesn't go away, it deepens and worsens, and you become hypersensitive to the sounds. So it grows. Like the attention you give to it grows what it becomes.
Yeah, okay. So not only is the sound there, but because of the fear and the beliefs and the stories around it, it became even bigger than the noise.
Yes. I curated for myself this story that it was too hard, and I didn't want to live with it, so had to find ways outside of it. So the most direct work that I've done around tinnitus and retraining my own thought patterns around it has been to just the kind of almost moment by moment work of understanding and being conscious of my thoughts, being really conscious of particularly the negative thought patterns and the anxiety, and being really aware of what that does to me and how it raises my anxiety and how it deepens that kind of neurological pathway script of my own hypersensitivity to it. And to do that, it's about telling yourself a different story over and over again. So every time I'm having that thought, this is too hard, or I can't do this, or I can't live with this, is to think about the bigger story. And even for me, doing the research around knowing that you can do retraining therapy, knowing that you can unlearn to hear, was a positive, hopeful thing for me. And I thought many other people have done this in their life. I can do this too. In 3 months, this will look differently if I start now, thinking differently about this and rescripting this story for myself. So particularly at first, in the first months, and every time it's sort of gotten harder again, I've had to do the same work, is to just do that. And it is almost thought by thought sometimes.
Can you give me an example of what do you say to yourself, or what are you actually doing inside of your head to retrain your story and to reinterpret this for yourself, to accept it?
Sometimes it's the bigger story I've got to tell myself, like it will be okay.
Yeah,
You know from other people's stories, and at first it was other people's stories, not my own. But I now know from my story that this doesn't have to be my life. Don't have to be drawn into this internal dialogue that tells me I can't cope with it.
So I think it's relevant for just managing our life, not just tinnitus. Would that be fair to say? Is there a connection?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I think tinnitus has taught me a great deal about my own life and about the stories that I tell myself. A good example is exactly what you've just said. And for me, 2 years ago, my husband died suddenly. It was, a huge shock to me and my girls. And there are, so again, I was saying before, there are things that happen to you and then the stories that you can write about it. And I think what tinnitus has done is helped me with some of those stories that to recognise when I'm writing a story that doesn't have to be written in my life. So I remember the night Michael died. He died, was pronounced dead at around 10 o'clock at night, and I remember going to bed, a couple of hours later. Didn't sleep a wink that night, as you can probably imagine. But one of the thoughts in the middle of the night that, of all the chaotic and numb thoughts that were going on for me, there was a thought that just stood out really clear as day, and it went something like this. Michael was the outgoing, fun, energetic, encouraging, just lovely, interesting person in your relationship, no one's going to want to hang out with you anymore. And I remember thinking that thought and just going, that's just ridiculous. But that thought stuck with me, like it just needled its way in and stayed. And interestingly, talking to other women who have lost their person, I'm not alone in that thought. That's a thing. But my journey with tinnitus had kind of given me a language for thinking about the stories that we write for ourselves. And I realised pretty early on that was a story I could write for myself into reality if I let it, because being, losing a person, there's all sorts of loneliness and being alone in new ways that you have to get used to. And you can actually write that story in pen pretty quickly for yourself. So I realised that I needed to change that story. After a few weeks, one of the ways that I decided I would do that was to actually speak that story out loud to some friends. Yep. And I think this is a big way of I think this is a really helpful way of dealing with the stories that we write ourselves, is to talk about them with other people. And often we're scared to do that because they sound stupid.
Yeah.
So I sat down with a few.
That's kind of the point, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But I sat down and I said that sentence to my friends because it was still a fear that I had, and it was just a couple of close friends, and I felt ridiculous as I said it because it's like it sounds even more ridiculous saying it out loud to people. But I knew that actually saying it out loud and having other people tell me the story I needed to hear was really important.
So what do you believe now then?
Well, my friends just straight away said what I know in my heart of hearts, but what I needed to hear from someone else was, yes, Mick was that. And a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves come from a kernel of truth.
Yeah, he was vivacious and joyful and extroverted and had bad humour, so you don't have that.
That's right. That's right. But they said, yes, he was all those things, but you're a bunch of other things, and we love you and we're not going to leave you alone. And I think sometimes the stories we tell ourselves and the fears that actually sit underneath them are a little bit more of those existential, come from that existential place of the fears we have about being left alone, or how, when life dramatically changes, what that's going to look like. So, that's just a really little example. I've had lots of different other stories like, I'm a failure as a parent, I can't parent alone. There's a whole bunch of things that over the last 2 years have been just thrown at me. But tinnitus has been a really visceral, embodied way of saying, of realising that I can change that story. I can unlearn to hear something, actually a real sound in my head. I can unlearn to hear that, and I can also unlearn stories that I tell myself.